Welcome. This is Lynn Fraser with the Kiloby Center for Recovery and the Radical Recovery Summit. I'm here today with Ken Seeley from Intervention 911. I'm really happy to be able to have a talk with him. We're going to talk about recovery and long-term care, and he's got years of experience in the business. So I'm really looking forward to that. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please, Ken?
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. My name is Ken Seeley, like you said, and I've been doing intervention since, 1999, and working in the field and sober myself since 1989. So it took me 10 years before I started working in the industry, but I love it. I love what we do, but unfortunately, we're just not getting those results we need to be getting to save people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about Intervention 911? I know that's probably what you're most famous for. And when did you start it? What goes on? What did you learn from it? Just whatever you'd like to share about that.
Yeah, like I said, I started doing interventions in 1999, and then about 2001, I opened up Intervention 911, and we realized that so many people, the number one symptom of this disease is denial, and so many people needed the help, and their families recognized they needed the help, but they didn't want the help. So, going out, and at the beginning it was called the 12-step call. You'd go out and convince somebody to go to treatment, and, they would go, get some help. But then you realize even then, it's so sad that, no matter how you talk to them and tell them that their life could be better, they still don't want to hear it. They still want to stay numb for whatever reason, because they're in their disease and they don't want to get sober. So, you got to create some kind of a balance where there's consequences to motivate them, and, some goals that they could achieve, if they even know they have goals to achieve, because mostly when they're in their full-blown addiction, they don't even know that.
So there's a lot of elements that come into play then. One is the numbness. They just want to stay numb. So what is it that you could do? Is it the fact that the family members are there? What is it that helps people to go, okay, maybe it's worth it to try and have a look at this?
Well, I just had lunch with a good friend of mine, a colleague of mine, that said, and I put my staff through motivational interviewing, and had them go through that training. But in all reality, what addict makes the right decision when they're loaded on drugs? So this motivational interviewing, and you have to follow out and do what they do. His response to me was, the people that think that's the truth for people with an addiction, they don't know this disease, because no addict, they're shooting a needle in their neck, getting high, and then you're going to tell them, oh, what would you like? And ask them what they would like. So they're so numb, as you said. And again, I'm not saying that motivational interviewing doesn't work at all. There's a place for it. You got to be loving and compassionate when you're there as their therapist, but you can't get them in to see a therapist unless if there's consequences to motivate them to get in that front door. So that's where I believe the problem is in our industry, is because everybody wants to fix it with these modalities that don't work. We still got a 3 to 7% success rate in, for people getting sober. And that's what it was in 1989 when I got sober. And the only thing growing are the numbers of deaths right now. That's what's growing in our country. It's not the people in recovery, it's the people that are dying. So what we're doing isn't working. And the government, I'm just so disappointed that they want to put this harm reduction crap into place and get everybody loaded on methadone and Suboxone. That's another thing that I have that I'm really upset about, because that's not the answer. That's, one of a great friend of mine, Dr. Roland Reeves, he said, that's like, you have a little, I love the way he explained it. You have a little cub, like a little tiger cub, And it's so cute. That's the addict when they first get sober. Oh my God, this is so much fun. And you take it to parties and everybody loves it. And it's so much fun. But then that cub grows up and it becomes a tiger. And that tiger is controlling our lives. We try to put it back in the cage when we were able to when it was a cub. And it's not allowing us to put it back in the cage. So our disease has control over us. And we're going to say, oh, motivational interviewing and this modality and that modality works. The only thing that motivates any addict, I'm telling you, any addict, even the millions that are in recovery today, the only thing that motivated them to get them into treatment was a consequence. Nobody goes to treatment because it's a beautiful day or they just got a raise at work or they got engaged. People don't go to treatment for that. They go to treatment because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired of something.
Right.
And we got to create a scenario that what they're sick and tired of when they check into treatment is consistent for 5 years. And if we don't do that, shame on us as an industry, because that's the only thing that motivates them to still want to change. And the minute that they get into treatment, I'm not even saying treatment, detox, as you know, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The minute they get into detox, they start saying, oh, you know what, I feel better, I think I could lick this. I don't need much more help. So they finish detox, inpatient treatment for 30, 60, 90 days, and all of a sudden they got it. The reality is we never get it. I'm going tomorrow to speak at an AA meeting or a 12-step meeting, because I still actively have to work a program of recovery. And recovery is different for everyone. I love the Kiloby Center because they set up a different form of recovery. It's not based in 12 steps, but there has to be some continuum of care. And if we don't provide that and educate the addicts while they're in detox, that recovery is a process, again, shame on us.
Right. And that's expensive to track and follow somebody and provide care for way longer than the 30 or 60, 90 days. How is that going to happen? What kind of steps could we be taking or talking to politicians about?
Well, we've been doing this for many, many, many years, over 30 years. I have a friend of mine that's a doctor in Florida, and he ended up in the doctor diversion program, and he's still sober 30 years ago. And their program is outlined where there's an intervention to get them into treatment where the medical board says, you are going to treatment or you're going to lose your license. And you're going to follow a program of recovery. And it's not a quick fix. It's for 3 to 5 years. And you're going to follow that program of recovery. And if you do not, there's a consequence for you not following that and you lose your license. So that program has been successful with an 80 to 85% success rate is the average in all states across this country. And yet we're getting a 3 to 7% success rate. Again, shame on us. So we have the formula that works. It's long-term care where you get them into treatment. And really treatment is all about, the only thing they need to learn in treatment is understanding they have a condition that needs, that they have a disease that needs long-term care, period. That's all they need to understand in treatment. And they could start the process of what that long-term care is going to look like getting a great therapist, working with someone. When I got out of treatment in 1989, I had a therapist for 3 years. I didn't just go, oh yeah, I'm cured. And I went to 12-step meetings and I worked a program and I did everything I was supposed to do. And that's why in July, I was able to get 28 years because I still do that. When there's a crisis in my life, I'll go back and find a therapist and say, hey, something isn't working right. And I could just as easily turn to drugs. And I find that I do the work that I'm taught to go out there and get some professional help and deal with why I'm feeling that way, because that's how we save people's life. This is a process. And if I wasn't educated that this was a process like the doctor diversion programs, then I would be probably dead by now.
Yeah, that's that's a different way of looking at it than what kind of the traditional treatment programs do. And it's much better to have 90 days or 6 months in a program than it is to have 30 days, but that's even still not enough. So when you're doing the intervention and it's not a doctor who could lose their license, what kinds of consequences do people set up? Because you're working with families and close friends.
Correct. And like I said, every single person that goes into treatment, they go into treatment because there was a consequence, period. They don't go into treatment for any other reason. There was a consequence. So the doctors, like you said, nurses, pharmacists, lawyers, pilots, they all have a diversion program lined up for them. Unfortunately, the average person like myself doesn't have that. So what we need to do is design that with the family system. So you educate the family on what they've been doing in the past and show them that, okay, this one thing you were doing is supporting recovery. So you put a line in the sand and you say, okay, what you're doing here is supporting recovery. What you're doing over here is supporting the addiction. And then you make it very clear to the family that this is not about being half pregnant. This is about they are in their addiction, and they're either in their addiction or they're in recovery. They're on one side or the other. They're not in the middle somewhere. They're on one side or the other, just like being pregnant. You're not half pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. So that's the way the families need to understand this, is that what they do needs to only support recovery. And if they do anything to support the addiction, then shame on them. I don't want to shame them. It's more about, okay, you didn't know it until now, but now that you do know that you're supporting the addiction in that way, then yeah, shame on you. You're the one that's causing, because I always say more addicts die out there from codependency than the addiction themselves. Because if the families are over here supporting the addiction by putting a pillow under it, then what happens is they put a pillow under it and then they say, oh, this isn't so bad, the addict. They just hit a pillow. And they were like, oh, this isn't so bad. So they go further down and further down. And every addict out there, they also have a moral compass within them. And they always say, and I did it too, that I would never do it if I would never get that bad if I did this. And then I would do this. And then, a good example, I'm not going to do drugs during the week. I'm only going to do drugs on the weekend. And I would never do drugs at work because, I'm too ethical. I have, boundaries around that. I would never do that. And then I'm at work doing drugs. Oh, well, I would never do it through the whole week. I'll just start on Thursday. And then all of a sudden it's Monday through Friday, you're getting high, and on the weekends also. So our moral compasses dissolve as we get further in our addiction. And people that think that, let's ask an addict what they want with motivational interviewing, that they're going to give you an answer of what they want. They don't know what they want. It's just like the doctor diversion program. The doctors know what they want, the nurses know what they want, but they're not able to tell you what they want. They're guided. So what we do with the family systems is every single addict that's in treatment, we believe that this is so necessary. We do a meeting like this over the internet, and you could get 25 family members on this system at one time, and you spend 4 to 6 hours deciding where they were supporting addiction or where they're supporting the recovery process. When they're supporting recovery, we put a family recovery plan together. And I love this because I just did one actually for the A&E intervention show. And I helped the family see where they were supporting the addiction. And the sister says, I think I might need help. I think I'm going to go to AA. And the father says, yeah, I think I'm going to go too. So the father went to AA, the sister went to AA. So when we did the intervention the following day, the whole family system said, hey, in our family contract, we're going to get sober. And if we don't get sober, we're going to go to treatment just like we're asking you to go to treatment for. So you put this family recovery plan together. You develop it in that 4 to 6 hours. You give it to the addict that's in recovery in the treatment facility. they sit down with their therapist and they decipher what they would like to be added to that, because they're now in recovery. So we say, like a good example would be, okay, you stole that watch. We didn't arrest you because you're our kid. We're not going to arrest you for stealing that watch. But that watch was an expensive watch and it's a felony. So instead of pressing charges, we just turned a blind eye to it and said, oh, well, another one that they screwed up and, damn, we lost that watch. We lost just like we lost all the other jewelry. So that's what the families normally do. That's supporting the addiction. If they would say, I got a police report right here that I reported this watch stolen, and I know that you took it, I'm going to turn you in and I'm going to have you arrested, and you're going to face the consequences, the legal consequences, if you choose to leave treatment early or don't stay in recovery for 5 years. So the family has the power, but it's going against, which is heartbreaking to me, because it's going against all internal feelings of how to nurture a loved one. Nurturing a loved one is turning the blind eye. It's not turning them in. It's not having them arrested. I just did another one for the doctors. It was on the other day, and the mother's like, well, there's nothing I could do. I can't have her arrested. I'm not a cop. And I'm like, you're not a cop. I was like, she's sitting in your house, in your bathroom, smoking heroin, an illegal drug, and you can't call the cops and have her arrested? But they don't think of that. They don't think of all the things. I mean, I know every addict out there is doing something illegal.
Right.
Everyone, drugs are illegal. So they're doing something, the way they're getting the drugs, the way they're getting the money for the drugs. So if you can find a legal consequence to motivate them to get into recovery and stay in recovery, you get a chance at, I always look at it as, like there's an angel and a devil on your shoulder. Your disease is the devil, and the angel's, telling you what what you really want for your life, because I don't know any addict that wants to be a drug addict and be addicted to heroin. Mm-hmm. So you're listening to that on your shoulder saying, oh, today I'm not going to use. Today is going to be a good day. I'm not going to use. And then by noon, they're like, oh my God, I got to get to the dealer, and it's on automatic pilot. So they don't have anything to block them. But if they had that police report sitting there saying, oh, you go get high, mom's going to get you arrested for that watch that you stole, then all of a sudden that voice over here that's telling you, just go get it, just go get it, just go. The automatic pilot, it's a blocker. It stops them from moving forward and taking that action to get that drug. And that's what every addict needs, is that blocker. And especially for the first 5 years, because the doctor diversion program tried to do it for 3 years, and they realized it wasn't successful, because the minute the 3 years were over, they were going out and getting loaded. So there's something magical in that 5-year number, that if you educate addicts, and us as professionals in the industry say, okay, this is what we need. It's a 5-year plan. Just like if you ask anybody, what's the cancer, what's the terminology around cancer? It's the 5-year survival rate.
Yeah, if you're cancer-free after 5 years, then yeah.
It's in remission.
Right.
You're pretty lucky. Mm-hmm. We need to educate the public that this is the same exact thing. If you have an addiction and you get 5 years clean and sober, it's pretty much, a done deal where you're going to live a nice, successful life. If you still do those things that you've been doing in the 5 years and continue that lifestyle, you could have an amazing life. So that's the mentality. And that's why I say treatment doesn't work at all. We're wasting, the government, the president just signed that bill and put billions of dollars into treatment, going to these treatment facilities that they're getting millions and billions of dollars all over the country to do what they've been doing. Treating people for the 30, 60, 90 days, and it doesn't work. So it's like, okay, let's put another Band-Aid on it and put people into treatment. And we know it's not going to work. We're still going to get a 3 to 6% success rate. The numbers of people dying are still going to continue to grow. So in all reality, it's just such a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's almost embarrassing that we're still doing this as an industry, and we're not saying people need long-term care. And going back to your earlier question, the way we were able to develop that is, unfortunately, the people with resources or doctor diversion programs that it's mandated. Another very successful program is drug courts in this country. The drug courts, if you don't abide by that recovery plan that they lay out for you, you're going to face the felony charge. But if you follow the recovery plan, I think they have a 60 to 70% success rate of people that follow that recovery plan for 2 to 3 years, and they graduate and they get back into society. They got jobs, they're working, they have a better life. So drug courts are very successful. But going back to the question, how do we get people to stay engaged after 90 days? What do we do? Number one, what we do is we educate them from the day they walk into detox. This is a lifetime disease, and it's a minimum of 5 years. So we educate them on the front end, and the minute that you leave your 90-day stay at treatment, you're going to get assigned a case manager. And
so that's the first thing they have to really accept, that this isn't a 30, 60, 90-day recovery, it's 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, look at that.
And then you have to continue your recovery. Yeah.
Well, look at them. They've been using for how many years?
Right.
3 to 10 years, and they think 90 days is going to cure that. Right. So this is a disease that's killing millions of people. And I think, what do they say? Some reports are 90 a day are overdosing. Some are 160 a day. So who cares if it's 90 or 160? That's a lot of people every day.
A lot of individuals, a lot of families, all kinds of impacts on that. Yeah.
Funeral costs, when they say, oh, well, we don't have the money for, I always say, I hope we don't lose this Obamacare that we're going through right now, because, I always say the best thing that you could do is have a family. If you don't have resources, go to your church, go to your family, and ask them each to pitch in $100 a month or $50 a month, and have them get $500 or $600 for a month. That will buy them insurance, and insurance will get them into detox, into treatment. And this is the best part, that to answer your question of how to get them in that long-term care, we went to the Joint Commission and we asked them, why don't you accredit case management and intervention? Because you need the intervention to educate the family. The intervention isn't on the addict, it's intervening on the family system. Mm-hmm. So why don't you accredit that? And they came back and said, we don't know. We do it for every other disease, diabetes and everything else. So we put together what the doctor diversion program does and what they do, and we mixed it up, and they came up with about a year and a half later where they had an accreditation. And now Joint Commission accredits case management and intervention. And then we went to the payers and said, how come you don't pay for case management and intervention? And they say, we love case management and intervention. Humana recently had a study done with them that was, I think it was, they assigned people at high risk, like people getting out of the hospital, people that, have diseases. They assigned them a case manager. Their first year on the medical side, their first year, they saved $800 million. $800 million for getting a case manager.
And that's not for addiction recovery, that's for medical disease.
Medical. So this is the same thing. If they would assign somebody a case manager when they get into treatment, mm-hmm. the minute they check into detox, they get a case manager that's going to work with the family system, that's going to help intervene on them, that is going to give them the tools on how to support recovery instead of the addiction. And then we wrap it up and we say, okay, when you finish your 90 days, and while you're in there for 90 days, we're going to send that case manager, not in there, but it's all telephonic like we are now. We're going to have a case manager work with you, and that case manager is going to work with you for the next 5 years. And that's when people are going to survive and they're going to get long-term recovery. And until they understand, and we're really made some really good headway this past few years. Joint Commission got it accredited. Insurance is now paying for it. So now we just got to get the numbers up where we could really show them they're going to save 800 million a year, just like they did on the medical side.
Right. Wow. So that makes such complete sense. And if we circle back to the families are terrified that the person with the addiction is going to die. So they're very motivated to try and do something. They're also completely wrapped up in it a lot of the time. You know, all of the things that happen with the addict. And there's a role of trauma and adverse childhood experiences. There's a lot of moving parts to this. And you referred to that with the father and the sister who said they were going to go into AA. So how do you work with that? Like if a family, you know, one of the people in the family is really enabling the addiction and they don't have the strength themselves to not continue to do that, what kinds of things might you do there?
Great question. So if I have a family system, and I did do one, on the show years ago, and this guy is still sober. I think it was like 8-9 years ago. And this guy is now working in recovery. And he was at home living at his mother's house. She was a nurse. He was addicted to opiates. And she would get what she could from work to bring home to her son because she didn't know how to handle the outbursts that would happen if she didn't bring it home. He would go ballistic on her. And so she was nursing him to death, is what was happening. He had a wife and 2 kids. And his wife lived with her mother across town. So the mom kept him there, like each family's blame the other family on the disease, right? Instead of looking at themselves in the mirror, they both wanted to, it's the husband's fault, it's the wife's fault. So they didn't let their spouses live together with them, but they lived separately. So what ended up happening is the mother was enabling him and nursing him to death. If she couldn't get drugs from work, she would go to the streets and get them. So it was jeopardizing her job at work. It was, going down and buying illegal drugs, a chance at her getting arrested for her son's addiction. And she was willing to do whatever it took to keep her son happy and not explosive. So when we did the intervention, she was so, like I said, that nurturing, intuition that comes from a mother, their intuition is telling them to take care of, nurture, love, do whatever they need, keep them happy, and yet that's nursing them to death. And I want everybody that hears this to know that as clear as day, that you're killing your kid. And when they die, I'm going to say, you killed them, not the disease. Because if he was out in the streets on his own, he would hit a rock bottom that every addict has to hit, and he would maybe surrender and get help out there on his own. But because he's comfortable in your home, you giving him the drugs, you're nursing him to death, so it's your fault he died. It wasn't the addiction, because the natural disease of the addiction would have stopped prior to, in most cases, but not all, but could have stopped earlier if the mom wasn't nursing them. And that's why I think with all the homeless out there and the drug addicted homeless people out there, we got to do something, because some families let their kid leave, and they leave and they're out there on the streets doing whatever they can to panhandle, prostitute, whatever they can to get the drugs. So we're not getting them help that way either. So if we could create a legal consequence when they're out on the streets, because in jail, at least they're alive and sober, and then ask the judge to mandate drug court when they're released, we have a chance at saving their life. But with this mother, she just didn't have it within her. Like you asked, what do you do about that one family member that just doesn't have it within them? This mother did not have it within her. She was like, I don't know if I could do that. The wife is going ballistic. We have all these people here. We're helping to save his life. And you're going to just say, you don't know if you could do that? So that means if he says, no, I'm not going to go, you're not going to kick him out of the house? Are you kidding me? So we realized the mother's disease of caretaking for him was just as intense as his addiction to the opiate pills. So what we did is we needed to intervene on her. So every single human being, if I was to ask you, what is the most important thing in your life? Every single person in the world has 3 things that they don't want to live without, that they would say, I don't want to live without this. And that's what we look for when we're doing an intervention, is what are those 3 things the addict can't live? Is it their freedom? They don't want to go to jail? That could be one on the top. So we get them arrested. So you find out what those 3 things are. With the mom, even though she's not on drugs, she's completely codependent and in full-blown addiction over caretaking for her son. And a nurse, it all makes sense, right? All adds up. So what are we going to do for her? We're going to look from her, what are the 3 most important things in her life? And number 1 was her son, of course, taking care of her son. Number 2 were her grandchildren. So we intervened on her and we said, I went to the wife on the side and I said, are you willing to move out of state and take your kids with you and never let your husband see your kids or his mother? So grandma will never have a relationship with your kids ever again. And she said, absolutely. If she's going to enable him, I'm leaving both of them, not just him. She will never see these kids again. So you find out what the motivation is for the codependent, right, and you take that away. You find, and it's kind of cruel to just take it away. So you got to offer treatment for that individual, because, we didn't get to this part. I know we're going to get to this part, but the addict that's sitting there taking the pills and the mother that's codependent, there's been a crisis and a trauma in their lives that makes them feel like they have to do these things to feel fulfilled within themselves. So there's something they haven't dealt with, and that's the reason why both of them are actively in their addiction. So it's not fair to just take it away and not offer mom help. So you got to offer them help too. Somebody that's that sick, there's treatment facilities in the country that address codependency, and they're up to 90 days themselves because their addiction is taking care of somebody just as bad as the addiction of an addict. So making sure that we address both of them so they could deal with their trauma and their crisis to figure out why it's more important for them to be a caregiver versus caring for themselves.
Right. And in that situation that you mentioned, there might have been a fear of violence too. The son was really explosive. He was obviously manipulating, might have been bullying her, threatening violence as well. So it can be very complex.
Oh, it would be absolutely. If you were an outsider looking in, there was so much senior abuse. I mean, mom was in her 60s, 70s. There's so much senior abuse that was happening, right, in that situation. But mom can't see that. Mom can't see that. So if you create a scenario that you say, okay, now I'm going to call in the officials and have the police come in for senior abuse, that your son is doing this to you while living in your home, then we're going to get, and she had her husband too, and he was willing to do whatever. He was done with it also. He couldn't take it anymore either. So he's like, absolutely, I would get somebody in here. So now he's going to get kicked out no matter what, and he's going to have nowhere to go because now the treatment's not available to him. So good luck if you don't want to do this now. So now all of a sudden, the mom's like, I'm going to lose my kids, my grandkids. My son is going to be taken out of my home, and I don't know where he's going to be. And if I do something now, he'll be in a safe environment at a treatment center, and I'll get to see my grandkids.
That's a big incentive.
Huge. Mm-hmm. And we all have it, right? Think of yourself. Think of 3 things that you would say that you wouldn't want to live without. And if somebody says, if you don't stop this behavior, I'm going to take these 3 things away or do everything in my power to take these 3 things away, you're going to be like, oh, well, maybe this behavior isn't the right behavior. Maybe I'll think about it and change it.
Right. So let's get to the role of trauma in all of this. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, when I first started in the industry, I thought it was a line of, I thought, oh God, here we go. You always want to blame it on something. And, I didn't really relate to it because I was like, I'm a full-blown addict, crystal meth every day for 4 years, selling it, pretty much as bad as it could ever get for any addict out there. And And I'm like, well, I never had trauma. So why do they always blame it on trauma? I had a normal upbringing. I had a good family life. I never was abused. There was never anything bad that happened. So I was like, how can you say that it's related to trauma? But yet I had the family tree. My grandfather's brother died as an alcoholic in the streets. I had uncles and cousins that were alcoholics and drug addicts, so the family tree. So I knew it was in the genes, but I didn't understand about the trauma. And then again, because like I told you, recovery is a process, and I'm not too smart. It's a little thick up here. It takes me a while to catch on. So years later of being suicidal with 10 years sober, I realized that, something still wasn't right. I'm clean and sober, but I want to die. I didn't want to live. And something still wasn't right. And I realized that at that time, that what it was is that as a kid, I was always bullied. And going to school every day and being bullied is a form of trauma. But I didn't connect the dots, but the crisis of wanting to die put me into treatment and helped me realize that, that is a form of trauma. Being beat up every day, or the fear of being beat up every day, is even worse than being beat up every day. And so that form of trauma was so intense that, I never did it. I buried it. I buried it. And that's the thing, is so many addicts don't even realize they have trauma. They think, oh, getting high is just fun. But in all reality, if I go back from the very, very beginning in my recovery, or when I first started doing drugs, when I did drugs, and you hear so many people say it, and you try alcohol, you're like, oh my God, I'm finally at home. I finally feel connected to the rest of the world. I finally feel like I'm seen, I'm not invisible. When you finally take that drink or that drug, you feel that. And that's a form of numbing the trauma, that you didn't feel that when you weren't. So it's a false connection that you have with other human beings. That's not a reality. It's all false. It's all, drug induced or alcohol induced. But you feel like finally you're present, you're a part of. So you take that from the trauma that you didn't even realize you had, or you may have buried because you may have been molested when you were 6 years old, and you buried that so far back that you don't even remember it, the trauma that happened as a kid. So you don't remember the trauma. So you're like I was, and you say, oh, there was no trauma. There was no trauma. But yet, if you really start digging, and you have a good therapist that is motivational interview trained and knows how to compassionately bring that out and show you that, yes, here's the root of the trauma, and here's why you felt comfortable when you first started using, and they slowly introduce these things to you, it brings an awareness for the addict to say, now it all makes sense. All the dots are connecting, and it is all rooted from, I have the gene of addiction, but maybe if I didn't have the trauma, maybe I wouldn't have needed to numb myself to the extent that I did.
Well, one thing I found very interesting when I learned about adverse childhood experiences is that neglect, emotional neglect, not being seen, that's equal in impact to other kinds of things that we would call abuse, or we would call trauma. That it's a survival level threat when we're not seen and protected. And when you're bullied, or you have the fear of bullying, that's hugely traumatic. It's being excluded from the tribe or from the family or from the safety is what underlies a lot of addiction.
Absolutely. And yet I love that you see that, because that's the root of it. And yet you bury it so deep because it hurt so bad. I remember failing third grade because I couldn't read. The reason I couldn't read is because I couldn't concentrate, because I was paralyzed in fear of my classmates. Exactly. So I wasn't part of the tribe. So I still have a reading disability where if I read, to myself, I could read and understand. But if I read out loud because I was picked on as in a group
Right.
setting,
Mm-hmm.
I shut down. I shut it off. I can't. Words jump in front of each other. It's not making as much sense. So I still have that from that 3-year-old back then. That's still as a 55-year-old this week. So it stays with you. And if you don't do the work necessary to, number one, identify where the trauma was, and then work on getting it out. And again, just like that mom I was telling you about, there's something in her life too.
Right.
Something happened in her life where she didn't feel heard, where she didn't feel connected, where she didn't feel, part of a tribe. And yet she's out there taking care of others to numb that, to feel that void, that she doesn't believe that she's good enough or that she deserves to have the life, and that she does. You can't even see it. I mean, it's just hard. It's about the therapy and the treatment that's out there, and that part of treatment does work. But where I say treatment doesn't work is because you're not going to get to that trauma in 90 days. You're not going to get to the root of that. And then, okay, you may have tapped into it in 90 days, but you're not going to get the tools necessary to live a long, successful life if you're not continually working on that with somebody when you leave inpatient treatment. Right. That's what about inpatient treatment not working.
So it's easy to understand as well, though, that when somebody is in treatment, all of this, everything that was formerly numbed by the drugs or the alcohol or the addiction is not numbed anymore. And all that comes forward. And then if we've always, if we've had that experience like you were talking about, you were just trying to make it through the day. You didn't have any energy left over to try and learn how to read or to concentrate on schoolwork because you're just in survival mode. And then, you're a teenager and you discover drugs and alcohol and woohoo, now I feel like I'm part of something. I feel confident. I feel connected. And so it's easy to understand the pull to do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have the pack. Now all of a sudden, the pack that I never had, getting on drugs and selling drugs and, having that group of people that had the same, mentality, all might be you feel part of. And you're like, how can this be the problem? When they say, oh, you got to stop doing drugs. Well, that's the only thing that, I always say when I'm doing an intervention on someone, it's like taking away their oxygen. It's like holding them under the water and saying, okay, breathe. They can't breathe. They've learned how to function out of survival mode with drugs and alcohol. And that's the only thing they know. So now you're going to say, and they can't even identify the trauma like we talked about. So if they can't identify the trauma, and you're saying, take away the drugs and alcohol, and shame on these treatment centers that aren't digging to find out what the trauma is. Shame on them because now you're just going to, I'm going to give them education, I'm going to give them therapy, and I'm going to do motivational interview. What do you want? Oh, you don't want to go to sober living? You don't want to go to you don't want to stay in treatment? You want to go home after detox? Oh, okay. Well, come back when you're ready. Shame on you. Because those people, like you said, they're coming off the drugs. It's like now they don't have oxygen. So they're going back into survival mode that they learned as a kid. And their only thing to do is to react. And they start screaming and yelling until they get their way. Like that adult kid at 40 years old living at mom's house, screaming and yelling until he got his way. And all reality, that none of that works. You got to dig down deep, get to the trauma. You got to identify it with them, not for them, but with them. When you identify it with them, you got to give them a path. And this is what the case manager does, is keeps them on that path of recovery for 5 years. So it's not just about consequences either. I hate when people say it's all about consequences. You got to, that's punitive. That doesn't work either. You're not going to shame somebody into recovery. So you could motivate them to get into recovery, but then you need to have the goal, the the goals that they set for themselves. Where's their passion? So in that recovery plan that you're developing with them, you're saying, okay, here's the trauma. To get out of that, you need to be in therapy. And where is your passion? They don't even know what their passion is. They don't know what their goals are. They don't know any of that. They're so far away from that. Like you said earlier, they're surviving. They're in survival mode. They don't have time to think of where their passion is or what they love doing or what their goals are in life. They're just thinking, how do I get through the day? You said it perfectly. How do I get through the day? So you're going to ask somebody in early sobriety what they want. They want to know how to get through the day. That's all they know. And how to get through the day, the easiest way is get some more pills and get some more drugs or more alcohol. That's the easiest way to get through that day. So we teach them with their case manager after they get out of treatment is, okay, what is your goal and where's your passion? You like to play music, that's a passion. You know, so we're going to put you in a music class, or we're going to get you involved with something musical. We're going to get you, and your goal is to go to college or whatever that goal may be. We're going to help you reach that goal. So we're going to take baby steps on getting there. And I only regret that I didn't have somebody like that, a mentor, somebody that supported me to say, okay, because I always said, I think I was in second grade or something like that. And I came home and said, I want to be a doctor. I knew I always wanted to help people. And so in 30 years old, I got sober at 27. I went back to school and I said, oh, I want to be a doctor. So I said, I'm going to go back to school at 30. And I went back for a semester and I was like, I can't do this. But I didn't have that gentle, loving push to say, yeah, you can do this. Everybody else is doing it. It's easy. You could do it. You have that within you. And here's steps on how to do it. If I was pushed to keep going, I would have stayed on that track. But because I go back into survival, even with 3 years sober, I'm still in survival rate mode. Like I said, it didn't take me 10 years to figure out I even had a trauma. So if I would have had somebody that understood trauma, that understood where my goals were, and then if I would have said, well, you know what, I'm going to drop out of school this year and I'm going to, focus on a career. Well, is that career going to be what you wanted? Is that going to help you reach that goal that you wanted up here that we talked about? Yeah, no, that's not going to reach it. Well, why don't we figure out how to get on a job that's going to reach that goal? Just a case manager that could just say, remind me of what my goals and where my passion lies, versus having me derailed and going down another road. And thank God, the root of my road has always been recovery. I've been so fortunate about that. That, I believe is a gift. And, and I cherish that gift because I see a lot of my friends not making it. So I've always had the root of my life has always been in the first and foremost has been my recovery, making sure that I understand where the trauma is, where I'm doing the work. So you're not reactive, you're responsive and things like that. When you learn communication skills and working like that, it just helps, have a better life and then being able to help better people around me.
Well, and what you're talking about, what's coming to mind is raising the bar. So, when you're an addict, you're just trying to get through the day. And that's a pretty low bar for life.
Yeah.
And whether you're traumatized and you're not using some kind of substance, or if you're using the substance and that's really, it just kind of gets lower and lower and lower until it's just that, let's survive this day. And how am I going to do that? Where am I going to get the fix? So to have someone who's actually going, in life, there's all of this there's these wonderful possibilities. And often, and especially if you were never really parented that way, that never occurred to you that you could do what you love to do, or that you could follow a passion. I mean, that's really exciting.
And that's how I got into my career. I mean, we were asked at the very beginning, what I do. And, I always thought you had to have a lot of money in the bank to be successful, to be able to retire and, to be in a relationship. You had to have a perfect, all this insanity thinking in my brain of what normal or perfect would be.
Right.
And I gave up and I said, I don't care. I'm just going to answer the phones at a treatment center making $10 an hour. And I could afford my rent, and I'm in rent control, so I could live the rest of my life comfortably, and not worry about having a career or having, something. And really all it was is my passion to help people get out of that darkness,
Right.
because I lived in that, like I said, there's that devil and there's the angel on your shoulders. I lived in that hell on earth. And now I've been giving because of recovery to live in heaven on earth. So since I was been able to get that and the steps that I took, it's kind of a passion to be able to help people get from that darkness into the light of enjoying life and really seeing everything that you dream of in your brain. Like my dreams from 10 years ago, I surpassed over and over and over. So my dreams don't only come a reality, I surpass them when I'm on this road of recovery. So if I could help people get to that and get on that path, then that's a passion. So now my passion has become a career. And now my career has exploded financially where I never even thought there was that I could ever make that kind of money. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't about going out to make money. It was about following my passion and following what I love doing and helping others get out of that darkness, created a career that is a gift. Like I don't even feel like I work.
Right. That's a wonderful place to be coming from, just pure service. Yeah.
And you stay there. You just always remind yourself that, you have to stay there because the money could get you, off that trail. Like I was talking about, you see a lot of people, they start making money. And, I know a lot of colleagues of mine, then they go into gambling addiction, and then they lose everything they ever worked for, and, so if you don't stay solid on that path of recovery, the money could create misery in your life. So you have to keep that trail number one and first and most important, more than anything in your life, that path of recovery has to be number one. And so now I surround myself, because I don't have a case manager right now, but I surround myself with people that support this path of recovery. And those people that support this path of recovery are the ones that are my mentors that I look up to and I follow their lead. So they're the ones I'll bring problems to. They're the ones that I'll work with on solutions. And that's why, I don't know how I became so successful at what I do. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It's like, how does that kid from third grade that failed third grade because was just surviving every day, that ended up in high school or junior high, and I'd hear the locker shake, that's still traumatized, that locker shake. And I always hear it like somebody hits it behind me and then they, go to beat me up or hit me and that shake of that locker, I was scared of my own shadow. So how does that person, have a life that that's a gift, and the only way I could decipher that is that it's this path that I've been putting first and foremost. That's number one on my life, that path is more important than money, relationship, than anything else in my entire life. And as long as I keep that number one, and, and that's a spiritual connection is what it ends up being when you get into recovery. As long as I keep that number one, all the dreams and dreams become reality.
That's really inspiring, because I think one of the things that has to happen as you're entering into recovery is to believe that it's possible to be in long-term recovery and to see what life is like after you're in long-term recovery. And it's completely different than what it is when you're in the addiction. Mm-hmm.
Completely, because you don't I love the way you put it. You're in survival mode, period. Yeah. You are just trying to get to the end of that day without getting beat up, without feeling pain, without feeling invisible, without feeling, ignored, without feeling, you don't matter. You're just trying to get through that day without feeling those emotions. That's all life is about. You're trying to survive. And the gift of recovery is, yeah, I go back and I feel those, but now I use my trauma as rocket fuel to reach, to understand, number one, and be compassionate for that person that's there, and be able to be nurturing to guide them out of it. And I use that trauma as rocket fuel to get to the next level of where I want to be in my life. Right. So I don't use it as being a victim to it, like, oh, poor me, I was, abused, and all these poor kids out there getting abused in even today's society, getting bullied. Thank God it's, talked about a lot more, but it's still happening. But instead of taking that and saying, oh, poor me, I'm grateful those experiences happened to me, because if I didn't feel that trauma as that kid, I wouldn't feel the gifts that I'm receiving today, the happiness that I'm feeling today, because I know that I could get out of that darkness, and I can help people get out of that darkness and help them have an amazing life. But if I didn't experience that trauma, I would never, I couldn't relate. I wouldn't be able to communicate with people and know where they are and know how severe that pain is. Like I said, with 10 years sober, sponsoring 5 guys, going to meetings all the time, and buying a gun on the internet to kill myself. I mean, that pain, I know that darkness. You're in a tunnel where there's no light, and the only light is like, oh, well, I just can't do it. I don't want to hurt my family if I kill myself. And you know what? And then all of a sudden, just like I said, your moral compass gets further and further away. Well, I've seen people that loved ones die, and within 5 years, the pain numbs, and they're able to go without that person in their life anymore. And so I got rid of that one. And and I seen, this is a good way to kill so you create all this stuff, because that's how dark it gets. Right. It gets so dark that all the things that kept you from doing it, you see light and say, oh yeah, I could do this. I could do this. I could really do this, and I can make that happen. And to be that place of darkness, that pain that is associated with that, and be able to get out of that. If I didn't feel that pain and get out of that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Right. And the way I see it working is that we need to be able to be present with our own pain and trauma, and have recovered enough that we're safe for other people to be around, so that they feel safe enough to open up and to heal as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the most important part. And I think talking to other clinicians is, if you're not doing your work in the present time, then you shouldn't be seeing patients, period. Mm-hmm. If you're not doing your work, do not see a patient, because like you said, you have to be stable enough to be able to take on their pain and their misery, and be able to guide them in a way. And if you're just thinking, oh, I got my master's and and that gives me the qualification so I could do this. If you think that's the answer, and you're not doing your work, then no, you're creating more harm. You're creating more harm. It's just like the society saying, oh, like I said earlier about, the government wanting to get everybody on methadone and Suboxone, that's creating more harm. You're not getting to the root of the problem. You're not giving them the case manager to follow them to make sure that they're okay. You're creating zombies. I mean, I don't know about you, but I live, in a town where there's a methadone clinic, and people line up there like zombies. They're not proactive people in today's society. You might get 1 or 2 that show up and say, yeah, I'm successful, I got a job, but most of them are just sitting in line waiting every day for their drug. So
that alone is not the answer.
No, if you do that and you give them a case manager and dig to the root of their trauma and then wean them off of it, absolutely. Use that as a crutch to get them to the end goal, but don't put them on it for years and say, oh, this is what you get. And that's what all of them are doing. Right. Well, they have therapists there, but are they really getting the treatment necessary while they're on there? They're just making sure that they're following protocol to stay on the drug. That's all they're doing. They're not digging down and finding, like we talked about, work on the trauma, show them a path of recovery. They're not doing any of that. They'll be like, motivational interview. What do you want today? Oh, you want to go to McDonald's and get a ham? Okay, go to McDonald's. Whatever,
Right.
whatever they're doing.
So we're getting to kind of our end of our time here. We've been talking for an hour, but before we finish, I'd really like for you to just say, so somebody comes to you or somebody's listening to this and they're early in recovery.
Yes.
Or maybe they're not in recovery at all. What are the most important 2 or 3 things that people need to know, that you'd like for people to know?
So people that are early recovery or not in recovery yet.
Yeah, maybe kind of thinking, okay, this is serious, I should probably get into recovery. But what are the couple of things that would be really important for them?
I think the most important is, go into it open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
And go into it, something isn't working in your life and you can't put your finger on it, but be open-minded to figure out what that something is. And don't go in there as a know-it-all or going in there as, and again, living in survival mode for so many years, you think you know everything. You know how to survive, and you do. To live through that trauma and to survive, that's a miracle that you got out of that nightmare alive. So you do know a lot, but you don't know everything. So if you could just have a little bit of hope that somebody may know a little bit more, if you could trust them, then take this opportunity to find that person that you trust, that understands trauma, understands addiction, and work with them to really have them be a motivator for reaching your goals. Because if you don't have that little bit of trust or a little bit of that light coming through, and you still feel like you're going to be able to dictate and you're going to be able to call the shots, which you see all the time in early recovery. They all of a sudden know what's best for them and they know what's going to work for them because they've been down this path. And those are the people that don't make it, and those are the funerals we're going to. So if you have a little bit of hope and a little bit of open-mindedness, I think you'll have an amazing life.
So is there anything that you haven't said yet that you'd like to say before we finish?
Yeah, I think a lot of it also is when we do the case management, one of the most important factors in that is that you're randomly tested. The case manager checks with the family system, the prescribing doctor, if there's medications, the therapist, and most importantly, the drug testing company. Because the drug courts and the doctor diversion program, they have that as a component, and even though they want to be in recovery, we're saying, okay, you want to be in recovery, but the drug testing is more of, just an insurance for yourself. You want to be in recovery, so why wouldn't you take that random drug test just to make sure it's a reminder for you and whoever's part of your recovery team to keep you on track. Just like when you have diabetes, they check your sugar levels, right? Every day. You poke your finger, check your finger levels. It's the same exact thing. You have an addiction is a disease that's going to kill you. And just like diabetes, if it's not monitored, and random drug testing is the same exact thing. It's just another way to monitor and make sure. And most importantly, I think, is there's not one approach that works for everyone. There's so many different approaches out there. Like, I love the Kiloby Center because, they're not a 12-step approach. It's more of a mindfulness approach for recovery. There's so many different ways to approach a recovery. And so if you have that little bit of open-mindedness, take that open-mindedness and find what approach is going to work for you. Don't accept everybody's approach as this is the only way. My way is not the only way for every single person out there. I'm telling you, there's millions out there that won't hear what I'm saying, but there's millions that will hear what I'm saying. So the ones that aren't hearing what I'm saying, don't feel like what I'm saying is the end all. Go find another person that you could talk to and find an approach that works for you. Because as long as you don't give up that little bit of hope, that little bit of light that might be in there, you'll have an opportunity to have a credible life. I mean, it's sitting there, it's waiting for you. We all have the opportunity. We're the ones that shut it down. We're the ones that sabotage that. So follow somebody else's direction to get out of that darkness just for a little while. Just give them a little chance to get that opportunity to really give that life that you deserve and that life that is waiting for you. Because if you don't give that chance, and you still dictate the way things should be, you're cutting off, what's that saying? You cut off your hand to spite your...
Cut off your nose to spite your face.
There you go. Cut off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah.
You're going to live in misery the rest of your life, and you don't deserve that. So use that little bit of hope and get the help that you desperately need, because I know you could do it. I know you could do it. If I could do it, I had to learn how to survive since I was 3 years old, 3 years old. And I took that right up until I was 26 years old. So all those years, what is that, 25 years, 24 years, I lived in survival mode. So if I could, take what I learned and say, okay, maybe some of this isn't good. Some of this that I learned isn't good. And maybe somebody else can show me down that path of recovery and finding what path is going to work for me and opening up my awareness. Because like I said, the 12 steps was the one that originally did it. But then I had to go down a path of trauma and deal with that, and then I had to go down a path of relationships and deal with that. And right now I'm on a path of food addiction, right? So the reality is it never ends. But I'm following down those paths of recovery to make sure that I get the life that I deserve and I want by doing the work. And the work is not easy. It's not fun. Nobody likes doing it. It's a nightmare, but it's a lot less painful than living in that trauma and living in survival mode.
And look at your life now. I'm sure you never could have imagined that your life would be this way.
Never.
Yeah.
Never. My wildest dreams. Like I said, 10 years ago, I would have never thought this would be my life today. I would have never thought it. I would have, even my wildest dreams wouldn't. I surpassed that 100 times, to be where I'm sitting today. And it's all because I have a little bit of open-mindedness, and now that little bit of open-mindedness has grown a lot larger. And now I'm asking for different help in those areas. Like I'm looking for support in those areas. Like the food addiction, that's the hardest one. I went through crystal meth addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction. Then I went into codependency. I went into treatment for therapy for that. Then I went into love addiction, sex addiction. I've had all of them, because you want to find something from that trauma. You want to find something that's quick and instant and numb you. Quick and instant. What's going to numb you this? So sex addiction, love addiction, money addiction, work addiction, all of those are avoidance so you don't have to feel that pain. Exactly. So I used all of them, and my latest one is food. And so instead of saying, and I gained 70 pounds. And so a year ago this month, I said, I've had enough. And I started on that path of recovery for it. And I've been working on that path. But all of it is to numb that little kid that's still there, that little kid feeling that pain. It's all about numbing. And nothing has to be there.
Yeah. it's, our survival systems, our nervous system, it all plays such a role in this. And it's true that until we completely heal all of what's underlying it, those addictions are still going to come up, and we're going to have more work to do. And that's okay too.
Yeah, like we want to do the 5-year survival rate just so people, understand that's the process. But really, it's a lifetime.
Right.
They call it like whack-a-mole. The minute you get one,
Yeah.
another one pops up, and it's like, oh man,
Again.
I got to deal with this again. But if you're lucky, because every single time I deal with one, I get to another plateau of my life.
Right.
So every time I do the work on each one of these, I reach another plateau that I never thought was possible.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as I'm open-mindedness enough, and again, my window's a lot bigger now because I could trust it more because I've seen how it's worked in my life. But it's no easier. I mean, I'm telling you right now, it's no easier. Like I'll wake up in the morning and I'll say, today I'm going to stick to my food plan, and I'm not going to eat anything except that's on my food plan, and I'm not going to eat anything in between meals. No snacking. So I'm texting a friend of mine before we got on this call today, and I said, I'm staying on my food plan today. I'm not doing any snacking. And then I walk by the kitchen and I see grapes, and I put the grapes in my mouth. It's just like the heroin addict, right? Today I'm not going to pick up any heroin, and then all of a sudden it's right there. So I know the struggles that go along with it.
Right.
That I took 2 months off from the gym, and I just went back yesterday, and today were my first time back. And the struggle of going. I don't like going to the gym. I don't know anybody. That people say they like it, but I don't know. I think they're lying. Like going there sweating and become miserable and walking in circle. Oh, it's the worst. But it's a good.
No, go ahead.
No, you just know it's the right thing to do, and it's the thing that's going to, keep you mindful. And
what I think might be the difference for me is that over time, as I've done the work, I've become non-adversarial inside. So I've become my own friend, my own supporter. I don't judge and shame myself for these things. It's like, okay, here's something else that's coming up. I need to work with it. But I no longer think I'm just a terrible person because something's coming up. And that's a big shift that happens as we kind of move into healing and recovery. Yeah.
Huge shift. I mean, I couldn't even look anybody in the eye. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't even, because like you said, you don't have that trust within yourself, but learn to follow your intuition and follow that guide within you, because, we all have the answers within us. And the more we stay connected, the easier it is to hear the right answer, and that's the key, is really digging down and figuring out, doing the work, because it takes work. It's not easy. You didn't just wake up one day and that happen and say, oh yeah, I'm going to love myself and I'm going to, be able to help guide myself. None of that happens without doing the work. You got to do the work. So it's about following the process of doing the work. And in that, you get the gifts of what you received. That I think everybody should hear. And that's the thing I love. Another thing I think is good for newcomers, because one of the hardest things in this country right now is the finances. How do I pay for this? How do I, get this to happen? Like I said, get somebody to pay for your insurance. That's the easiest way. That's the easiest way that'll get you long-term recovery. Find that. If you can't do that, and you got to figure out a way to get, I didn't have insurance. I didn't have money when I needed therapy with 10 years of recovery, so I found somebody that in my community was giving away free treatment. It was like at a center out there. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what center it was, but there's so many of them out there. Senior centers. You just go to these centers and they have services out there that are available for people. And you go there and you find, and I had to interview 5 different therapists before I found one that worked for me. Right. So even though I had no financial resources, I had no insurance, I was able to get through that because, again, I wanted that road of recovery. I had 10 years clean and I wanted to stay on that road. So I did the work. And then the people that don't have money, well, why do I have to do the work? Why do I have to do the research? And I was like, well, you think that somebody that has $60,000 a month to pay for treatment, that they're just going to write them a check or give them their credit card? They're going to do the research. They're going to find out what $60,000 treatment centers are out there. They're going to call every one of them, and they're going to find out which one's best for them. So the reality is we all have to do the work. Nothing is handed to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hardest part for people to understand. It's work. It is not easy. It is a nightmare. I did not want to go to the gym today. I didn't want to do the work that I had to do in recovery.
Right.
But we do it because we know we're in hopes for that goal that's out that we set for ourselves.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much, Ken. It's been fascinating talking with you. And I'm sure the people watching this are going to want to learn more about where they can reach you too. So when you're doing your interventions, what's the best place, or people wanting to know more about you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, if you want, the intervention911.com is my website that, we're doing interventions. But really, if you want to see the continuum of care, all of them are listed on kenseeley.com.
Okay.
So if you just go to kenseeley.com, you could see all the different listings of, from the very beginning of detox, intervention to detox to treatment to continuum of care. You'll see each one of them laid out for you if you want an easy roadmap.
Okay.
An easy roadmap laid out for you on that website.
So that's KenSeeley.com.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I'll have that up here too so people can see it. But if people are just listening and they're not looking, then I want to be able to make sure they have the right spelling.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Go to KilobyCenter.com, Radical Recovery Summit. For access to the interviews, you can watch them free online for 48 hours after they air, or you could purchase an all-access pass. KilobyCenter.com.